Procrastination, it's that familiar tug of war between what we know we should do and what we end up doing instead. Maybe it's the report sitting untouched on your desk, the workout you keep postponing, or the dream project you've been meaning to start for months. We've all been there, caught in the loop of putting things off, only to feel the weight of guilt and frustration later. But what if I told you that the ancient philosophy of Stoicism holds the key to breaking free from this cycle? Marcus Aurelius, one of history's greatest Stoic thinkers, once said, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." His words remind us that time is our most valuable resource, one we often waste when we procrastinate. In this video, we'll explore how Stoic principles like discipline, presence, and control over your perceptions can help you tackle procrastination head-on. By the end, you'll walk away with practical tools to reclaim your time, focus, and sense of purpose. So, if you're ready to stop delaying and start living with intention, let's dive in. What if the key to overcoming procrastination lies in understanding what you can and cannot control? Think about it. How often do you delay starting something because you're worried about how it will turn out? Maybe you're afraid of failing, or you're overwhelmed by the possibility of things not going perfectly. This is where Stoicism offers a powerful tool, the dichotomy of control. At its core, this principle teaches us to focus only on what's within our power, our actions, decisions, and attitudes, and let go of everything else. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus famously said, "Some things are within our control and some things are not." When we procrastinate, it's often because we're fixating on outcomes we can't fully control, like how others will react to our work or whether we'll succeed or fail. But Stoicism reminds us that the only thing we truly control is how we choose to act in the present moment. Let's bring this to life with a modern example. Imagine you're working on a big project at your job. You've been putting it off because you're worried about what your boss or colleagues might think. But here's the Stoic perspective. You can't control their opinions or the final outcome of the project. What you can control is showing up, doing your best, and taking the first step. By shifting your focus to what's within your power, your effort, your preparation, your commitment, you strip away the anxiety that fuels procrastination. So here's a question for you. What's one task you've been avoiding lately? Take a moment to think about it. Is it something within your control, like starting a workout routine or writing that first draft? Or are you stuck worrying about things you can't control, like how others might judge your work? By applying the dichotomy of control, you can reframe your approach and take action without being held back by fear or uncertainty. This is the first step toward breaking the cycle of procrastination, and it all starts with understanding where your power truly lies. Stoics believed that remembering death could be the ultimate motivator. At first, that might sound morbid or unsettling, but hear me out. The Stoic practice of Memento Mori, Latin for remember you must die, isn't about dwelling on fear or despair. Instead, it's a powerful tool to help us focus on what truly matters. By reflecting on the inevitability of death, we're reminded of life's brevity and the urgency to make the most of the time we have. As Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." Think about that for a moment. How often do we put off the things that matter most, telling ourselves we'll get to them someday? But what if someday never comes? This idea isn't just philosophical, it's deeply practical. Take the example of Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher. Despite the immense responsibilities of ruling an empire, he kept a journal where he regularly reflected on his mortality. This wasn't to depress himself, but to stay grounded and focused. By reminding himself that his time was limited, he was able to prioritize what truly mattered and act with purpose, even in the face of overwhelming challenges. Now let's bring this into your life. Imagine you had only 1 year left to live. What would you stop putting off? Would you finally start that business, write that book, or spend more time with the people you love? The truth is, none of us know how much time we have left, but by embracing the Stoic practice of Memento Mori, we can shift our perspective and start living with intention. Instead of procrastinating, we're motivated to act not out of fear, but out of a deep appreciation for the time we've been given. So here's a challenge for you. Take a moment to reflect on your own life. What's one thing you've been delaying that you would prioritize if you knew your time was limited? Write it down and then ask yourself, what's stopping you from starting today? By keeping the reality of mortality in mind, we can break free from the trap of procrastination and start living with the urgency and purpose that life deserves. What if procrastination is a sign that you're resisting something you need to face? Think about it. When you delay a task, is it because you're avoiding discomfort, fear, or uncertainty? The Stoics had a powerful concept for this, Amor Fati, which translates to love of fate. It's the idea that instead of resisting or resenting the challenges life throws at us, we embrace them as opportunities for growth. Friedrich Nietzsche, who was deeply influenced by Stoicism, put it this way: "My formula for greatness in a human being is Amor Fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity." In other words, it's about accepting and even loving whatever happens, because every experience, good or bad, shapes who we are. So, how does this apply to procrastination? Often, we put things off because we're afraid of what might happen if we try. Maybe you're avoiding starting a creative project because you're scared it won't be perfect, or you're delaying a difficult conversation because you fear the outcome. But what if, instead of seeing these challenges as obstacles, you saw them as opportunities to grow? That's the essence of Amor Fati. It's about shifting your mindset from "I have to do this" to "I get to do this." When you embrace the process, even the hard parts, you stop resisting and start moving forward. Let's take a practical example. Imagine you're an aspiring writer and you've been putting off starting your novel because you're worried it won't be good enough. Here's the Stoic perspective. Instead of fearing failure, see it as a chance to learn and improve. Every word you write, every draft you revise, is an opportunity to grow as a writer. By embracing the challenge, you transform procrastination into purposeful action. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action." What stands in the way becomes the way. In other words, the very thing you're avoiding could be the key to your growth. Now, let's bring this into your life. What's one task you've been avoiding? Maybe it's starting a new project, having a tough conversation, or stepping out of your comfort zone. Take a moment to reframe it. Instead of seeing it as something to dread, ask yourself, how could this challenge help me grow? What could I learn from it? By adopting the mindset of Amor Fati, you can turn procrastination into a powerful tool for self-improvement. So here's a question to reflect on. What's one thing you've been resisting that you could start embracing today? Write it down and then ask yourself, how can I see this as an opportunity rather than an obstacle? When you learn to love your fate, even the hard parts, you'll find that procrastination loses its grip and purposeful action becomes second nature. Stoics believe that mastering our desires is key to mastering our actions. Think about it. How often do we procrastinate because we're chasing short-term comfort instead of long-term growth? Maybe it's scrolling through social media instead of working on that project, or choosing the couch over the gym. These small choices add up, and they often stem from desires that aren't aligned with what truly matters. Marcus Aurelius put it this way: "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. In other words, when we align our desires with what's virtuous and within our control, we gain the clarity and discipline to act with purpose. So, what does it mean to align our desires? It's about shifting our focus from external rewards like approval, comfort, or instant gratification to internal growth and virtue. The Stoics taught that true fulfillment comes from living in accordance with reason and doing what's right, even when it's hard. When we desire things that are outside our control, like validation from others or perfect outcomes, we set ourselves up for frustration and procrastination. But when we focus on what we can control, our effort, our integrity, our commitment, we find the motivation to take action, no matter how challenging the task. Let's bring this to life with a modern example. Imagine you're trying to write a book, but every time you sit down to work, you find yourself distracted by social media. Why does this happen? It's because in the moment, your desire for the quick dopamine hit of likes and comments outweighs your desire to write. But here's the Stoic perspective. By realigning your desires, you can reclaim your focus. Instead of craving external validation, focus on the internal satisfaction of creating something meaningful. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. In other words, what you choose to desire shapes who you become. Now, let's apply this to your life. Take a moment to reflect. What's one thing you've been putting off because you're chasing short-term comfort over long-term growth? Maybe it's delaying a career move because you're afraid of failure, or skipping a workout because you'd rather relax. Ask yourself, are these desires aligned with your long-term goals? If not, how can you shift your focus to what's truly important? By mastering your desires, you can break free from the cycle of procrastination and start taking meaningful steps toward the life you want to live. So here's a challenge for you. Write down one desire that's been holding you back. Then ask yourself, how can I realign this desire with what's virtuous and within my control? When you learn to desire what's truly meaningful, you'll find that procrastination loses its power and purposeful action becomes your default. How often do you find yourself stuck in the past or future instead of acting now? Maybe you're replaying a mistake you made yesterday, or you're so worried about what might happen tomorrow that you can't focus on today. Sound familiar? This is where Stoicism offers a powerful antidote to procrastination, the practice of presence. The Stoics believed that the present moment is the only time we truly have control over. As Epictetus put it, the chief task in life is simply this: to identify and separate matters so that I can say clearly to myself which are externals not under my control and which have to do with the choices I actually control. In other words, the past is gone, the future is uncertain, but the present, this moment right now, is where you can take action. Think about it. When you procrastinate, it's often because your mind is somewhere else, dwelling on regrets, worrying about outcomes, or imagining worst-case scenarios. But the Stoics remind us that none of that is within our control. What is within our control is what we choose to do in this very moment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present." It's a simple yet profound idea. By focusing on the here and now, you strip away the distractions of the past and future, and you give yourself the clarity to act. Let's bring this to life with a practical example. Imagine you're sitting at your desk, staring at a blank page, trying to write an important email. Instead of starting, you're thinking about how you messed up a similar task last week, or you're worrying about how the recipient might respond. But here's the Stoic perspective. None of that matters right now. What matters is the sentence you're writing in this moment. By bringing your attention back to the present, you can break through the mental fog and take that first step. This is why mindfulness practices like deep breathing or grounding exercises are so effective. They help you anchor yourself in the present so you can act with focus and intention. So here's a question for you. What's one task you've been putting off that you could start right now? take a moment to think about it. Maybe it's sending that email, making that phone call, or even just tidying up your workspace. Whatever it is, ask yourself, what's one small action I can take in this moment to move forward? By focusing on the present, you'll find that procrastination loses its grip and action becomes not just possible but inevitable. Remember, the power to overcome procrastination isn't found in the past or future. It's found in the choices you make right now. So, take a deep breath, bring your attention to the present, and take that first step. As Epictetus reminds us, you are not your body or your possessions, you are your choices. And those choices are always made in the here and now. Stoics believed that imagining the worst could help us act with courage. At first, that might sound counterintuitive. Why would anyone want to think about failure, rejection, or hardship? But here's the twist. By anticipating obstacles, we actually strip them of their power to paralyze us. This practice, known as Premeditatio Malorum, or the premeditation of evils, was a cornerstone of Stoic philosophy. Seneca, one of the great Stoic thinkers, put it this way: "What is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster." This is a reason for ensuring that nothing ever takes us by surprise. In other words, when we prepare for challenges, we're not caught off guard. Instead, we're ready to face them with clarity and resolve. So, how does this help with procrastination? Think about it. When you delay starting something, it's often because you're afraid of what might go wrong. Maybe you're worried about failing, or you're overwhelmed by the possibility of things not going as planned. But what if, instead of avoiding those fears, you confronted them head-on? That's the essence of Premeditatio Malorum. By visualizing potential obstacles, you're not just preparing for the worst, you're building the mental resilience to take action no matter what happens. Let's bring this to life with a modern example. Imagine you're about to give a big presentation at work. You've been putting off preparing because you're nervous about how it will go. What if you took a few minutes to imagine the worst-case scenarios? Maybe you stumble over your words, or someone asks a question you can't answer. Now ask yourself, what would you do in those moments? How would you recover? By visualizing these challenges, you're not just reducing your fear, you're equipping yourself with a plan to handle them. And when you step into that room, you'll feel more confident and prepared because you've already faced those obstacles in your mind. Here's another example: starting a new project. Maybe you've been putting it off because you're worried about all the things that could go wrong. What if you took a moment to imagine those challenges? Maybe you hit a creative block or you run into technical issues. Now ask yourself, how would you overcome those hurdles? By anticipating these obstacles, you're not just preparing for the worst, you're building the mental toughness to keep going no matter what. So here's a challenge for you. Think about one task you've been avoiding. What's the worst that could happen? Take a moment to visualize those obstacles and then ask yourself, how would I handle them? What's one step I could take to prepare? By practicing Premeditatio Malorum, you're not just overcoming procrastination, you're building the courage and resilience to act even in the face of uncertainty. Remember, as Seneca reminds us, the wise man looks ahead, and so he is not unprepared when trouble comes. By anticipating challenges, you're not just preparing for the worst, you're empowering yourself to take action, no matter what lies ahead. So, what's one obstacle you're ready to face today? What if procrastination is a sign that you're not living in alignment with your values? Think about it. When you delay a task, is it because it feels meaningless or out of sync with what you truly care about? The Stoics believed that living virtuously, acting with wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline was the key to a fulfilling life. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." In other words, it's not enough to know what's right, we must act on it. procrastination often creeps in when our actions don't align with these virtues, leaving us feeling disconnected and unmotivated. Let's break this down. Imagine you're working on a project that feels ethically questionable. Maybe it's a marketing campaign that exaggerates the truth, or a business decision that prioritizes profit over people. Deep down, you know it doesn't align with your values, but you keep putting it off because it feels wrong. This is where Stoic virtue comes into play. The Stoics taught that true fulfillment comes from acting in accordance with wisdom and justice, even when it's difficult. When we procrastinate on tasks that conflict with our values, it's not just laziness, it's a signal that something deeper is out of alignment. Now let's bring this into a modern context. Picture this: you're in a meeting, and your team is pushing for a decision that you know isn't fair or ethical. You feel the weight of procrastination setting in. You don't want to act, but you also don't want to speak up. Here's the Stoic perspective. Courage isn't just about facing external challenges. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. By aligning your actions with virtue, you not only overcome procrastination, but also build a sense of integrity and purpose. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, just that you do the right thing. The rest doesn't matter. So here's a question for you. What's one task you've been avoiding that might not align with your values? Take a moment to reflect. Is it something that feels dishonest, unfair, or out of sync with who you want to be? If so, how can you realign your actions with your core virtues? Maybe it's having a difficult conversation, making a bold decision, or simply saying no to something that doesn't feel right. By acting with wisdom and courage, you can break free from procrastination and start living in alignment with what truly matters. Remember, as the Stoics taught, virtue isn't just an abstract idea, it's a way of life. When you act in accordance with your values, you not only overcome procrastination, but also build a life of meaning and purpose. So, what's one step you can take today to live more virtuously? Write it down and then ask yourself, how can I align my actions with what I truly believe in? When you live with integrity, procrastination loses its grip and purposeful action becomes second nature. Stoics believe that self-discipline is the foundation of a meaningful life. It's not just about forcing yourself to do things you don't want to do, it's about aligning your actions with your values and goals, even when it's hard. Think about it. How often do we procrastinate because we lack the discipline to follow through? Maybe it's skipping the gym, putting off a project, or delaying a difficult conversation. But here's the thing, discipline isn't about perfection or willpower, it's about consistency. As Epictetus, one of the great Stoic teachers, put it, no man is free who is not master of himself. In other words, true freedom comes from mastering your impulses and staying committed to what matters most. So, how does self-discipline help us overcome procrastination? It's simple. Discipline creates habits, and habits create momentum. When you commit to small, consistent actions like writing for 15 minutes a day, exercising 3 times a week, or tackling one task at a time, you build a rhythm that makes it easier to stay on track. The Stoics understood this deeply. They believed that every action, no matter how small, shapes who we become. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, the very act of practicing discipline, even when it's uncomfortable, is what transforms us. Let's bring this to life with a practical example. Imagine you're trying to write a book, but you keep putting it off because the task feels overwhelming. Here's the Stoic approach. Instead of focusing on the entire book, commit to writing just 1 paragraph a day. It's a small, manageable action, but over time, those paragraphs add up. By practicing discipline in this way, you're not just making progress, you're building the habit of showing up even when it's hard. And that's the key. Discipline isn't about grand gestures, it's about the daily choices that lead to lasting change. Now, let's apply this to your life. Take a moment to reflect. What's one habit you've been wanting to build but keep putting off? Maybe it's reading more, meditating, or finally organizing your workspace. Whatever it is, ask yourself, what's one small, disciplined action I can take today to move closer to that goal? Remember, it's not about doing everything at once, it's about taking one step and then another. As Epictetus reminds us, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. In other words, define who you want to become, and let your disciplined actions lead you there. So here's a challenge for you. Write down one habit you want to start building today. Then commit to taking one small, disciplined action toward it. Whether it's 5 minutes of exercise, 10 minutes of writing, or simply decluttering one corner of your desk, the key is to start. By practicing self-discipline in this way, you'll not only overcome procrastination, you'll build a life of purpose, one small step at a time. How you start your day often determines how you spend it. Think about it. Do you wake up and immediately reach for your phone, scrolling through emails or social media? Or do you take a moment to set your intentions and ground yourself before the day begins? The Stoics understood the power of a purposeful morning routine. Marcus Aurelius, in his personal journal Meditations, wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." This simple yet profound reflection set the tone for his day, helping him focus on what truly mattered and avoid distractions that could lead to procrastination. So, what does a Stoic morning routine look like? At its core, it's about starting your day with intention. Instead of letting external demands dictate your actions, you take control of your mindset and priorities. This could mean setting aside time for reflection, journaling, or even a few moments of quiet meditation. The goal isn't to add more tasks to your morning, it's to create a space where you can align your thoughts and actions with your values. By doing this, you're less likely to fall into the trap of procrastination later in the day, because you've already set a clear direction for how you want to spend your time. Let's break this down with a practical example. Imagine you wake up and spend the first 10 minutes of your day journaling. You might write down 3 things you're grateful for, reflect on a Stoic quote, or set an intention for the day ahead. This simple practice helps you focus your mind and reminds you of what's truly important. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." By starting your day with positive, purposeful thoughts, you're more likely to carry that mindset into the rest of your day. Here's another example. Instead of jumping straight into work, take a few minutes to visualize your day. What's one task you've been putting off that you could tackle today? By mentally preparing for it in the morning, you're more likely to follow through when the time comes. This is the essence of a Stoic morning routine. It's not about adding more to your plate, but about creating a foundation of focus and clarity that helps you stay on track. So here's a question for you. How do you currently start your day? Take a moment to reflect. Are you setting the tone for productivity, or are you letting distractions take over? If you're ready to create a more intentional morning routine, start small. Maybe it's 5 minutes of journaling, a short walk outside, or simply taking a few deep breaths before you dive into your day. The key is to make it meaningful and sustainable, something that helps you align your actions with your values and goals. As Marcus Aurelius reminds us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. By starting your day with intention, you're not just reducing procrastination, you're building a life of purpose, one morning at a time. So, what's one small change you can make to your morning routine today? Write it down and then ask yourself, how can I use this time to set the tone for a focused, productive day? When you start with intention, you'll find that procrastination loses its grip and purposeful action becomes second nature. Stoics believed that even the smallest actions can lead to great change. Think about it. How often do we put off big goals because they feel overwhelming? Maybe it's writing a book, starting a business, or getting in shape. The sheer size of the task can paralyze us, leaving us stuck in the cycle of procrastination. But here's the Stoic perspective. Every monumental achievement begins with a single, small step. As Seneca wisely said, it does not matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop. In other words, it's not about speed or perfection. It's about consistency and progress, no matter how incremental. So, how does this help us overcome procrastination? When we break a big task into smaller, manageable steps, we reduce the mental resistance that keeps us from starting. Instead of staring at a mountain, we focus on climbing one small hill at a time. This approach aligns perfectly with modern productivity techniques like the Pomodoro method, where you work in short, focused bursts. By committing to just 25 minutes of focused effort, you create momentum that makes it easier to keep going. The Stoics understood this principle long before productivity gurus coined terms like time blocking or microtasking. They knew that small, consistent actions compound over time, leading to profound results. Let's bring this to life with a practical example. Imagine you're trying to write a novel, but the idea of completing an entire book feels daunting. Instead of focusing on the end goal, break it down. Start with one paragraph a day. That's it, just one paragraph. Over time, those paragraphs add up to pages, chapters, and eventually a finished manuscript. By focusing on the small, achievable step in front of you, you bypass the overwhelm and build the habit of showing up. As Seneca reminds us, every long journey begins with a single step. The key is to keep taking those steps, no matter how small they seem. Now, let's apply this to your life. What's one big goal you've been putting off? Maybe it's launching a side hustle, learning a new skill, or improving your health. Take a moment to break it down. What's one small, actionable step you can take today? It could be as simple as researching your first step, writing down your ideas, or even just setting a timer for 10 minutes of focused work. The beauty of small actions is that they're easy to start, and once you start, you're already ahead of where you were yesterday. So here's a challenge for you. Identify one small step you can take toward a larger goal. Write it down and then ask yourself, what's stopping me from starting right now? Remember, as the Stoics taught, greatness isn't achieved overnight. It's built through the accumulation of small, consistent efforts. By focusing on what you can do today, you'll find that procrastination loses its grip and progress becomes inevitable. As Seneca put it, associate with people who are likely to improve you. Welcome those whom you are capable of improving. The process is mutual, for men learn while they teach. In other words, even the smallest actions ripple outward, shaping not just your life, but the lives of those around you. So, what's one small step you're ready to take today? Write it down and then take it, because every great journey begins with a single, small step, and that step is yours to take. How often do you let yourself off the hook for not taking action? It's easy to make excuses, isn't it? I'll start tomorrow. Or it's not the right time, or I'm just not in the mood. But here's the thing, every time you let yourself off the hook, you're giving away your power to act. The Stoics understood this deeply. They believed that true freedom comes from holding yourself accountable, not to others, but to your own principles and goals. As Epictetus, one of the great Stoic teachers, put it, no man is free who is not master of himself. In other words, if you want to overcome procrastination, you have to start by taking full responsibility for your choices. So, what does accountability look like in practice? It's about creating systems that keep you honest with yourself. The Stoics didn't have modern tools like accountability partners or habit tracking apps, but they had something even more powerful: self-governance. They believed that every action, no matter how small, should align with your values and goals. Marcus Aurelius, in his personal journal, often reminded himself to act with integrity, even when no one was watching. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This is the essence of Stoic accountability. It's not about external pressure, but about internal discipline. Let's bring this into the modern world. Imagine you're trying to stick to a new habit, like exercising regularly or writing daily. You could use a journal to track your progress, or you could find an accountability partner, someone who checks in with you and holds you to your commitments. These tools aren't just about keeping you on track, they're about creating a structure that reinforces your self-discipline. The Stoics would call this living in accordance with nature, aligning your actions with your highest ideals even when it's hard. Here's a practical example. Let's say you've been putting off a big project at work. Instead of waiting for the perfect moment, you commit to working on it for just 30 minutes a day. To hold yourself accountable, you tell a colleague about your plan and ask them to check in with you at the end of the week. This simple act of accountability transforms your intention into action. As Epictetus reminds us, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. In other words, define your goal, and then take the steps to make it happen. So, here's a question for you. How can you hold yourself more accountable? Take a moment to reflect. Is there a habit you've been wanting to build, or a task you've been avoiding? What's one small step you can take today to align your actions with your goals? Whether it's setting a daily reminder, sharing your plans with a friend, or simply writing down your intentions, the key is to create a system that keeps you honest with yourself. Remember, as the Stoics taught, accountability isn't about punishment or guilt. It's about empowerment. When you take responsibility for your choices, you reclaim your power to act. So, what's one commitment you're ready to make today? Write it down and then ask yourself, how can I hold myself accountable to this? When you embrace the practice of self-governance, you'll find that procrastination loses its grip and purposeful action becomes second nature. Stoics saw failure not as a setback but as a teacher. Think about it. How often do you avoid starting something because you're afraid of failing? Maybe it's a new project, a career change, or even a personal goal. That fear of failure can be paralyzing, keeping us stuck in the cycle of procrastination. But here's the Stoic perspective. Failure isn't the enemy, it's one of life's greatest teachers. Seneca, one of the most influential Stoic philosophers, put it this way: difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body. In other words, every failure, every mistake is an opportunity to grow stronger and wiser. So, how does this help us overcome procrastination? When we reframe failure as a learning opportunity, we take away its power to intimidate us. Instead of seeing failure as something to avoid at all costs, we start to see it as a natural part of the process. The Stoics believed that resilience isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up every time you do. As Seneca wrote, "The wise man is neither raised up by prosperity nor cast down by adversity." In other words, whether you succeed or fail, what matters is how you respond. When you embrace this mindset, you're less likely to procrastinate because you're no longer afraid of the outcome. You're focused on the growth it brings. Let's bring this to life with a modern example. Imagine you're an entrepreneur launching a new product. You've poured your heart into it, but when it hits the market, it doesn't perform as well as you hoped. The fear of this outcome might have kept you from launching in the first place, but here's the Stoic approach. Instead of seeing it as a failure, see it as feedback. What can you learn from this experience? Maybe it's a chance to refine your product, understand your audience better, or pivot your strategy. By reframing failure as a teacher, you transform setbacks into stepping stones. Now, let's apply this to your life. Take a moment to reflect. What's one failure you've experienced in the past? Maybe it was a project that didn't go as planned, a goal you didn't achieve, or a decision that didn't work out. What did you learn from it? How did it shape who you are today? By reflecting on your past failures, you can start to see them not as mistakes but as lessons. And when you approach future challenges with this mindset, you'll find that procrastination loses its grip because you're no longer afraid of failing, you're excited to learn. So here's a question to consider. What's one thing you've been putting off because you're afraid of failing? Write it down and then ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen and what could I learn